The board operated and continues to operate in a caring and professional manner. Overperforming for a long period of time, of course, leads to stress. At some point along the way, this became an ongoing issue for me, right alongside the highs and good feelings that come from doing your best to make a difference in our community. Doing my best. Most of the time, I love what I'm doing here at UUSM. There's simply too much of it and not enough time to breathe. Being retired makes it easier to spend this kind of time volunteering at UUSM, but it also means I'm neglecting other areas of my life, and the stress can negatively impact my health. I'm on several UUSM committees, all of them important, but it was my role as leader of the Worship Associates this year that gave me a frame of reference for how much time goes into planning worship services. Making sure that Sunday services were operational each week for nearly a year turned out to be a huge job. I'll never forget my first aha moment many months ago when I realized that we didn't have a minister. Funny how I missed that, given that I'm on the ministerial transition team. I was awkwardly operating in the combo role of minister, worship associate, and at times staff administrator. What I saw clearly was that the minister is the glue that holds the Sunday services together, including the services that minister isn't at. One of the things that made my role with worship so hard was that I didn't have the experience or the background for this highly specialized job that often took 15 to 20 hours a week, and that didn't count my other committee work or board work. I like to think I stepped up to do all this under extenuating circumstances, but in fact, I continue to overfunction in a way that's not healthy for me or the congregation. I am clear that I don't want to be a part of the problem by creating unreasonable expectations for those that come after me. Many others at UUSM have put in these kinds of hours as well. I'm learning that overfunctioning is a systemic issue common in families, organizations, businesses, and yes, religious communities. So how did we get here? And what can we do about it? Is it embedded in our culture? Or is it a personality thing, like perfectionism or difficulty setting boundaries? Or maybe it's a human thing. There's simply too much to do. One of my theories about UUSM is that we have been understaffed for many years. That would create an outsized expectation for volunteers that builds on itself. Also, volunteer shortages are common in congregations across the country as more people work longer hours outside of the home. Then there's the issue that blew up during COVID across denominations: too high of expectations for ministers. If our staffing structure and budget was based on the minister having an outsized job description, we have been understaffing. As a member of the ministerial transition team, I know that the ministerial market today is highly competitive, and many ministers will no longer agree to the job descriptions of the past. Turns out they're not superhuman, and neither are we. I thought a lot about why it feels vulnerable for me to share all this. I know much of the time I present well, or well enough, and I must look like I'm holding up. Okay. Further, you as a congregation express your care and gratitude often. I do appreciate that. But I also realize that if I don't take this scary step of being real with you, my dream of UUSM becoming a robust, sustainable community making a difference in each other's lives in our North Central neighborhood and beyond is not likely to happen. So here goes. Deep down, I feel like I need to get to a place with my UUSM work where others can step in easily. It doesn't need to be perfect. Thankfully, perfectionism is not one of my vices. The truth is, I'm embarrassed to pass on what I consider to be a disorderly mess to someone else. Why? Because that means I'm a mess underneath the facade of looking good on the outside. In the meantime, I think to myself, I'll just take the brunt of it until I can get things better organized. But in the meantime, it's taking longer than it should, because in fact, my inadequacies and shortcomings are real. I need help, I'm not perfect. Thankfully, people like John Farrow, Laura Bull, Kathy Kinner, and Becky Howland, among others, have stepped up and made it possible for me to get by. These people in particular have done heavy lifting on my behalf. There are many others who've stepped up in a variety of ways as well. I'm grateful. My hope is that if we can share when we're starting to feel overwhelmed or burned out, we can change the way we operate. If we're going to dream and grow and become all that we want for our beloved community, we've got to figure this out. So here's what I'm doing now. Number one, allowing myself to be vulnerable with you all by pulling back the curtain a bit on what it's been like for me as a leader this last year. 2, letting the holes in my UUSM work show during stressful times instead of trying to fix them or cover them up. 3, creating some boundaries between my personal life and UUSM. I'm finding that letting more joy, delight, and humor into my life helps. It really does. And lastly, I plan on advocating like heck to make sure that we have adequate staffing to operate this congregation, keeping in mind the health and well-being of our ministers, current staff, and volunteers. We're all important. Becky Howland has done an extraordinary job as staff supervisor, looking under the hood and streamlining our systems. I do not have that gift. And the board is working hard to figure out what it will take to staff and operate UUSM next year. Thank you, Tom Newman. Of course, that will require more money. Yes, I'm planting a seed. Lastly, worship associates Charles Dumont, Sean Collins, and Bill Hevlin were my backbone for most of the year in worship. And the ministry of Joel Chapman, Jack Brennan, and Reverend Stephanie made my work possible. We wouldn't be here without them. And Tovis, thanks for supporting me and sharing my truth. Amen.